A Mary Sue, or for guys, a Gary Stew, is defined as someone who is seen as too perfect and almost boring for lack of flaws. And that is exactly what we have for today's topic. Welcome back to the Best of Rivals, where we talk about the best rivals that Shonen Jump has to offer. Today we are talking about everybody's favorite golden boy, Yuno from Black Clover. Yuno is the perfect wizard. He is incredibly powerful, and the mountains that he is able to climb all throughout the series is something that cannot normally be surmounted. I know that I harped on him a little with him being a Gary Stew, but that does not rob him of the fact that he's cool as shit and always flexes on his opponents without even trying, and that is kind of in his archetype. However, he would not be who he is if it wasn't for our main character, Asta. Oh, by the way, this will have spoilers for the end of Black Clover, so just so you know. Before we get into his relationship with Asta, however, I do want to talk about the main thing that sticks out to me about Yuno, and that is him being the chosen one. Now, this is never mentioned specifically, but Yuno is the guy chosen by everything. He's revealed to be the long-lost prince of the Spade Kingdom. He gets Sylph, which is one of the 4 great spirits. He joins the Golden Dawn, the best and strongest at the time in the Clover Kingdom, and during the Elf Invasion arc, where a bunch of previous elf souls enter the bodies of current age wizards, Yuno, who got possessed, is the only one that is able to fight back and cause the other soul inside him to submit. Oh, and let's not forget that he has star magic, something exclusive to Yuno, and he has 2 grimoires. Obviously, he joins the Golden Dawn to be a parallel to Asta, joining the perceived worst guild in the Black Bulls, which is only one example of a choice being made simply because of Yuki Tabata's, author of Black Clover's, story decision with Asta. But the point is that Yuno is set to get everything. Another one is Yuno being beloved by mana. Asta has 0 magic, so his rival will be overflowing with magic. He is able to do Mana Zone, an ability that allows him to use magic anywhere within a certain range, which is extremely hard to do, yet he gets it rather easily. And Sylph even mentions that Yuno being chosen by her is also a part of his powers, which is such an insane line. I mean, to read/hear that line and not come to the conclusion that this man was not chosen by everything is kind of ridiculous to me. Him getting star magic in addition to being able to fight with Sylph really seals the deal for me regarding him being the chosen one. Not to mention the insane powers that Yuno gets thanks to being able to access Spirit Drive with Sylph. Using this ability gets him access to things like the Spirit of Zephyr, which is a sword, the Spirit of Boreas, which is an axe, the Spirit of Euros, which is a bow, and the Spirit of Nodos, which is a shield. Not to mention his invasion ability and Spirit's Hush Dance, but he also gets access to some of the most broken things that I've seen in manga, period, with his star magic. During his fight with Xenon, where Xenon gains a devil heart and becomes super strong, Yuno's determination causes him to awaken his bloodline's magical ability. With his star magic, he is able to summon a bunch of stars throughout the battlefield that he is able to teleport to whenever. He even bypasses subspaces. And then as he grows stronger, more stars appear. Not to mention that in that very same fight, he hit Saint Stage, which is near full resonance with the spirit. I get that the guy has to be strong to beat all these late stage bosses, but I do think that maybe Tabata laid it on a little thick, giving Yuno every trick under the sun. It does make for very cool scenes though, I will admit, and I do think that there is a strong argument you could make for Asta progressing so much that Yuno was forced to progress as well, which I am sure is how Asta feels when looking at Yuno. But the difference is that I would believe if Tabata came out and said that everything that makes up Yuno's DNA forced to form a progression within him because he wanted to stay in the same league as his eternal rival. Yuno exists because of Asta, and I mean that in both a literal and figurative sense. Yuno was created to be a foil for his main character, but also Yuno makes it pretty obvious throughout the series that he is rivals with Asta and Asta alone. When they were younger, Yuno got robbed and was defenseless, but Asta stepped in and got his stuff back for him. Asta then did what he does best and told Yuno that he will become the Wizard King. This then inspired Yuno and caused a swirl of courage to swell inside of him, and at that moment Yuno decided that he will be Asta's rival on the quest to become a Wizard King. Despite being in the direct face of adversity, Asta, beaten and bruised, still had a smile on his face, stating his dream. Yuno before was a coward, which, who can blame him? He was just a little kid, but he couldn't do anything when someone was trying to walk over him. But Asta showed him how to stand up for himself and not let any challenge stop him. Since then, Yuno has had this certain aura around him, not allowing him to give up and succeed in any situation he finds himself in. He's extremely powerful and has an innate talent inside of him, which Asta helps Yuno blossom like a flower, and has his true innate potential unleashed and becomes a insane, unstoppable force. Asta is this endless light for Yuno, that light that is at the end of the tunnel. Yuno does not really hold many people above himself. He's a very arrogant person who can walk over people in the heat of battle because now he's just stronger than the rest of them. The one thing that he can't do is beat Asta. Even though Asta downplays his achievements throughout a lot of the series so that he can motivate himself to grow stronger, Yuno sees Asta for what he is and is being stronger than anyone else that either of them encounter. Yuno and Asta came from the same orphanage, so if Yuno could make it, so could he. All of this to say is that I think Yuno is slightly a little too obsessed with Asta. It feels like there are times in the story where all Yuno does is, in interactions, is somehow loop it back to talking about Asta. During the Royal Knight tournament arc, Yuno and Noelle end up getting partnered together, and Yuno's inner dialogue is how he will trust her because Asta always fights with her. I get that they haven't really had the chance to interact with one another, and their common friend is Asta, but to have your rival character and your female lead team up together and the rival's thought is immediately how it relates to Asta, I don't know, it could just be me reaching, but Asta seems to come up a little too often. Even though I just called Yuno out for maybe having Asta on the mind a bit too much, I can't necessarily blame him. Throughout the story, Asta always appears whenever Yuno is in trouble. Despite Yuno being the strongest, Asta is the true savior of the battle and the real person that people should look out for when fighting because he is always the one that comes in to clean up. Yuno, with the ginormous sword coming down on him, would not move from his spot because he believed Asta would save him. And to his credit, Asta did just that. Asta is Yuno's superhero. As they progress throughout the series, Yuno's dialogue shifts to where he views them as more equal. But I always got this sense of Yuno viewing himself as the younger brother to the guy that always bails him out. I even think that his desire to be Wizard King was initially decided in the same way that a younger sibling latches onto the same thing as the older sibling because they think the older sibling is just oh so cool, and the younger sibling wants to be just like them. During the battle between Lucius thinks in his head how Yuno was such an obstacle in his path, because in every other timeline, Yuno is barely a threat. But thanks to the one timeline where Asta exists in, it pushed Yuno to the extreme lengths that he was at the end of the series. Asta being a singularity in the timeline causes Yuno to become one of the strongest beings in existence. Yuno's potential was unleashed because of Asta being there for him, which harks back to the point of Yuno not being able to exist without Asta, and to have such an influential character in the verse to be who he is simply because of his rival. Maybe it's a little on the nose by Tabata directly telling us this, but I think it's a strong narrative established between the two that ends up transcending what we typically see in manga. And I do think that is something to note about the series and the rivalry between these two characters. Aside from Asta, Yuno does not really interact too often with others in meaningful ways. He only has his guild, the Golden Dawn, which has characters like Mimosa and Klaus that are around, but the one I really wanted to highlight was Langris. Langris being Finral's brother from the Black Bulls that Langris absolutely tore through during the Royal Knight tournament. The fact that Tabata brought back Langris to pair up with Yuno when fighting Xenon was a fantastic idea. Not only did it make sense story-wise since Yuno trained with Langris to combat someone with spatial magic, which Xenon had, but also it showed us the role that Yuno had to take. Not for himself like he has been up to this point, but for the Golden Dawn. Langris and Yuno were the two strongest remaining fighters from Golden Dawn after Xenon came through and swept through the rest of them. And Langris and Yuno are both the previous vice captains, and neither of them like each other particularly, and both of them are sore losers. So they really had to pull out all the stops when it came to getting revenge for their guildmates and for their captain, which was captured at the time. By setting aside the differences that he had with Langris, however, and dedicating his time to the Golden Dawn, he was able to show that he can be a leader in multiple ways, and shows that he will eventually be the leader of the guild that he puts his life on the line for. The last thing I wanted to go over was his relationship with the Golden Dawn, the guild that he's a part of. I would have to think that Yuno's relationship with the Golden Dawn is the main reason why he chose being their captain over being the Spade Kingdom king. He was literally given the throne after finding out that he was royalty, and was asked to serve as their king. Despite this, Yuno chooses against this. At the end of the series, we get the admittingly really cool fight between Asta and Yuno over the title of Wizard King, which Yuno eventually loses, and the last chapter we see that Yuno is the new Golden Dawn captain, even though he was really bequeathed that title in the fight against Lucius, but we get to see him in a more casual and official setting as captain. I get that Yuno would want to serve under and work closely with his best friend, and I get that he was an orphan and doesn't necessarily have any ties with the Spade Kingdom aside from blood, but as someone who came from an orphanage, and especially in a series like Black Clover where one of the overarching themes is found family, it makes sense that he chose not to take the position. That being said, world peace could likely be overwhelmingly achieved if, out of the 4 major kingdoms, 2 of them were ran by best friends who could be strong allies with each other and would likely never have anything more than a hiccup with one another. So long as those 2 work together, Yuno and Asta could achieve peace, but Yuno says no. And I can only think that it is because of him wanting to be at least not abandoning his post as the new captain with the Golden Dawn, but also not abandoning his best friend. Much like the Black Bulls are Asta's family, the Golden Dawn are Yuno's. It's not hard to understand why he chose not to go back, especially after all they went through, with half the Golden Dawn being wiped out earlier in the series. I too would understand wanting to stay with those he fought with and fought so hard to protect. But man, it's just like, world peace is right there. It feels as if, earlier in the series, Yuno is just working for himself. He's pushing himself to a goal of becoming Wizard King, but after the Golden Dawn gets wiped out, Yuno really takes his position seriously. You see, Yuno's a bit selfish and egotistical. He thinks he's the shit, and you know what? With his kind of skill and prodigal level that he has, can't really blame him. But that also makes him the sorest loser of all time. Yuno even brings it up, I don't know how he hates losing, but when he was fighting against Xenon initially, he lost so bad that there was no way to look at it in any other way than total and utter defeat. This moment is a very humbling moment for Yuno. Not only did he get promoted at this point to vice captain after Langris decided to be a creep to his brother, but he was also a vice captain in title only, because Yuno was stronger than the current captain in William Vagrants, who sucked ass at any encounter that he was a part of after he came back to the kingdom during the elf invasion arc. Yuno's strength peered through the entire series, like how he fought a captain to a near stalemate in the tournament arc, which was nuts to see where he stood only at that point in the story. But he's always been really strong, and his track record in the series is really impressive. Until you get to this fight. This is the first one-on-one fight that Yuno lost, and it really beats him up. Not only could he not hold up his title that he earned, but also he caused his found family to get killed, or heavily injured, or captured in William's case, because he was straight up not strong enough. It wasn't that Yuno didn't show up on time, he was there. He tried to protect everyone, but he just couldn't because he wasn't strong enough. Yuno has his get back with revenge against Xenon, and after that, Yuno makes sure that the Golden Dawn and everyone else will be protected through him. He will never let his family die again. Unless, of course, you're Asta, but he wasn't really killed and Yuno wasn't even there, so it's fine. And Yuno immediately wanted to get revenge for that, too. Yuno has made it to where, with all of his crazy abilities, especially things like the Neverland technique that controls time in a wide space, Yuno quite literally can control the battlefield, and with his star powers to teleport, he could be anywhere at one moment. It is rather kinda neat to see such a character compensate for their flaws through their technique, showing a form of growth and maturity throughout his out-of-box thinking on how he can protect people. Not simply to be better, but not to let the people that trust in him to protect him down. If he aimed to be the Wizard King, he had to have some over-the-top power that causes him to be even considered for that position. And it is a very nice treat to see Yuno go through that and evolve on what it means to be the king to his people. Not just one who is the strongest, but one who fights for the weak, to rule with respect and be strong enough to never lose again. Yuno is a very special character in Black Clover, and I mean that in both the writing sense, but also in universe, as he is the perfect wizard. He is the best rival for someone like Asta, and I'm really glad that Tabata included such a character for his cast. That's all I got. If you like what you heard, consider liking and subscribing, as it would mean a lot. If you have any thoughts on the video or any ideas for future videos, please leave them down in the comment section down below. Other than that, I'm out of here. Goodbye.